Hello, this is Sweet June 2010. It's been a while since I've been on here. Um, just really going through some things right now. My dear cousin just passed away, and he was struggling with cancer for a very long time. And if you look at some of my other videos, uh, I briefly mentioned him in some of my videos. I was talking about what a good dad he was, and he was one of the best black fathers that I knew, you know. And he was kind of like a brother to me because, I've been knowing him literally all my life. And so it was pretty devastating that we lost him. So this was dealing with that. And, some other things that I'm dealing with right now. It's just like engine blew up on my car, so I gotta try to worry about getting another vehicle. So just trying my best not to be stressed out, and trying to lean on Jehovah God more. But what I want to talk about is there's been a lot of controversy of the use of the N-word, and I know Paula Deen got in trouble a while back. She got in trouble when in a court. She was documented in court saying that she used the word like 25 years ago, and everybody got so upset and so up in arms because she admitted to that in court, and it cost her a lot of money. I mean, she lost some endorsements, and she lost a contract she had with the cooking channel, and she winded up losing a lot of money behind that, over something that she said many years ago. And but that just let me know how powerful words are, and there's been a lot of controversy over that, the use of the N word, and that's what I want to talk about. Should we or should we not be using the word? Now, most black people will agree that white people shouldn't use the word at all, period. Because historically, that word was used to murder black people, mistreat black people, and torture black people. So historically, every time that word was used, a black person was mistreated in some kind of way and murdered, and just treated horribly. So historically, the word has a very, very violent connotation to it, which brings me to say that I feel that nobody should be using the word. I don't feel black people feel like, a lot of black people feel like, well, they the ones started with the word. We're just basically taking the word back. It's like, in a sense, taking the power back. But I don't really buy that. I don't really buy into that theory because, how can we tell them not to use it and we use it? Black people, we use it in the context as a term of endearment, towards each other. But I don't feel it's appropriate for black people to use the word either. To be honest, I don't feel it's appropriate for black people to use the word either. Because the reason why I say that is because too many of our people had to suffer and die because of the use of that word. It's, everything that negative that happened to black people back in the day was behind the use of that word. And I feel like we're kind of dishonoring our ancestors and the people that fought for civil rights and all that every time we let that word come out of our mouth. And I used to say the word just like a lot of other black people, but I'm really, really working on taking out that word out of my vocabulary. And it doesn't matter if you put the A on the end or the R on the end. It's still the same meaning. Historically, that word has a very, very violent history, violent past. A lot of violence and a lot of suffering and pain was associated with that word. And I don't feel anyone should be using it. I don't feel black people should be using it. White people should be using it. And a lot of white people get angry because they say, well, how is it not okay for us to use it? But then they say it to each other all the time. It's like a double standard. And in a sense, it is. I mean, I have to agree that, and I know for us, we feel like, well, it's different. It's a different meaning for us when we use it, because when I know personally, when I hear, and I tried to explain this on Facebook one time, I know personally when I hear the word coming from a white person, I instantly get intimidated because that word was associated with a lot in the past. Like I said, when that word was used, either a black person was being murdered, a black person was being beaten, or a black person was being mistreated in some kind of way. It was always something violent and negative associated with the use of that word historically. So now when I hear a white person say that word, I instantly think, okay, is this white person bold enough to say this to our face, then what else is this white person bold enough to do? So that's what I think in my mind, and I think there's a lot of hatred that comes from behind the use of it. But when a black person uses it, I don't feel intimidated or threatened, obviously, because it's used by someone of my own race. But that still doesn't make it right. It still doesn't make it right. And a lot of black people say that to justify the use of that word. Because when we say it, I feel, in my opinion, that we're just honoring our ancestors. All of our people that had to suffer, that had to die a violent, torturous death, all the black people that had to suffer during the civil rights era, behind the use of that word. That word came out their mouths before they did all that stuff. And there was a lot of suffering that occurred on account of the use of that word. And I feel like every time we say it, we're dishonoring that in a sense. We're basically not saying that it's not a big deal. And in reality, it is a big deal. Because a lot of our people had to suffer and they had to die. And so none of us should be using it. When it comes down to it, none of us should be using that word. None of us. Black people, white people, or whoever should not be using that word. It's not acceptable, and it's not appropriate, And I think that I'm really glad that though, because I will say this, I'm really happy because back in the day, white people could use that word and there was no consequences behind it. They could just hurl that word around like it was nothing, and our feelings wasn't taken into account. Our feelings didn't matter. Our feelings wasn't taken into account, and our feelings didn't matter when that word was just thrown around. But now I really am glad that there's some accountability now. I'm glad that when a white person says that word, there's consequences behind it. or when they say anything racial towards black people. I'm glad that there's consequences behind it, because for years and years and years, they could say those things, and there would never be any repercussions. It was like our feelings as black people wasn't even acknowledged. It was no big deal. That it was acceptable, deemed acceptable for them to be throwing racial slurs at us. And so now I am grateful and I am glad that there is some accountability now. That when they say those things to us or about us, that there's some type of accountability. And our feelings are being validated. That the use, and they're acknowledging the fact that this word is not appropriate, and this word hurts people, and it has historically have a very violent meaning, and you should not be using it. And I'm glad that there's consequences behind it, and there's some accountability. But black people shouldn't be using the word either. I don't feel like it's acceptable for us to use it as either, And I know I used to say the word, and I know I'm trying really hard to take that word out of my vocabulary altogether, because it's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate. It's not acceptable. It's just not. And so that's what, my view on it is. A lot of black people still feel like it's okay to use the word, but I don't feel like it's acceptable. So I don't think anybody should be using the word, because historically it's just too much violence and pain, too much pain, violence, and suffering took place because of that word being used. Historically, that word has a horrible meaning. So I just don't think it's acceptable. I just don't think anybody should be using it. As far as the Paula Deen situation, I just think that yes, it was wrong for her to say what she said, but she said it many, many years ago, and I don't think it's fair to hold one person accountable for something that they said several years ago, and you're not holding anybody else accountable for saying something years ago. Because I'm sure that I've said things that I didn't have any business saying about other people, and I'm sure every person on this planet has said something that was not right towards somebody years ago, but they didn't get punished for it. So why would you take this one person and punish this one person for saying something that inappropriate years ago? If that being the case, then we all should lose jobs and stuff like that, because we've all said stuff that we didn't have no business saying a long time ago, and sometimes we still say things that we shouldn't say. So I just don't think that that it was too much. I think that was just taken a little bit too far. Should she have said it? No, of course she should have said it. But it was many, many years ago. And why I'm a firm believer in not judging someone according to their past. Why judge somebody for something that they did years ago? I wouldn't want to be judged for something that I did years ago. You can't change it. You can't go back and change it. It's already been done. It's already been said, or it's already been done. There's nothing you can do to change it. And it's not a loving thing to do at the end of the day. So I just feel like, but at the same time, I am glad that there's some accountability now. Whereas back in the day, there was no accountability being held for other races of people using that word towards us. There was no accountability. Our feelings weren't even being acknowledged. And I am glad that there's accountability now. And I'm glad that that's their way of acknowledging our feelings and holding people to some accountability for making racial slurs or saying racial things. Nobody should be doing it. That goes for black people, or white people, or any race of people on the earth. Shouldn't be making racial slurs towards anyone, derogatory racial remarks towards anyone, because racism is stupid anyway, because it's not like you can choose your race of nobody can choose their race. You're born the race you were born in, and you can't choose it. So racism is really stupid, and it's a waste of time. So with that being said, that's my take on it, and that's Sweet June 2010.